Story RH, the podcast that makes a long story short.
Welcome to all.
History is made of stories.
In this episode, we'll be looking at the pros and cons of best practices.
A best practices handbook can be reassuring, a volume that tells you what to do in different situations. It helps to reproduce good or effective solutions, capitalizing on past successes to keep moving forward. It's just good sense, right?
Yes, but sometimes this approach can lead people to force ready-made solutions onto situations to which they aren't well suited. So, best practices, pros and cons. What's the story?
Let's go back to the goal, which seems pretty impervious to criticism. Trying to capitalize on proven solutions is a good idea. It saves time and expands your catalog of possible reactions, thereby fostering continuous improvement.
So it can really make a big contribution to companies, giving them a broader, more comprehensive collection of responses to identified problems. What's more, it means employees who encounter a given situation for the first time don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Right, and this is really the goal the knowledge management movement set out to achieve in the 1990s. Focusing on explicit and tacit knowledge, the movement gave rise to quite a few different practices.
And they all aim to catalog effective solutions to create a sort of reusable knowledge capital.
You're a salesperson in Lisbon, and you have to draft a sales offer for a construction client regarding a certain topic. It will obviously be useful for you to consult offers prepared by your colleagues in other places to see what should be included.
And when it comes to any problem, if there are methods, tools, or ways of working that have been successful, it's best to know. It's quite simply a kind of intelligence and open-mindedness.
However, reliance on best practices can sometimes foster laziness. For example, believing that the solution that worked in this situation will also work in that other situation.
The problem with best practices arises when they lead the person using them to avoid really thinking about the problem they're facing, or to disregard differences between their situation and the context of the best practice and blindly apply an unsuitable solution.
This is especially dangerous because applying a turnkey solution to a different situation may not only reduce its effectiveness, but also create new problems. So you risk getting a result that is the exact opposite of what you were aiming to achieve.
At the root of all this, there's probably a reemergence of Taylorism's one best way, which argues that, regardless of context, there is only one right way to do things. But this has been disproved, of course, particularly in our complex, changing world.
Contingency theory has broadened our horizons. In other words, there's no one right way to do things, but there is a right way depending on the context.
It's illusory to believe that a single turnkey solution to a problem with a number of complex characteristics, many of which are often completely new.
In other words, what we're calling into question here is the relevance replicating predetermined models without a second thought.
Exactly. Guides are there to guide us, to show us the way, not to give us the exact procedure to follow. So, when it comes to best practices, the best practice is to think of them as guides and not absolute truths. It's never a good idea to forego critical thinking when faced with a problem.
To recap, there are pros to best practices. They capitalize on tried and true solutions as long as we are careful to apply them thoughtfully. But there are cons, too. Thinking of them as ready-made solutions can lead us to results that are diametrically opposed to what we were hoping for. Is that right?
Exactly right. Way to make a long story short.
Story RH, the podcast that makes a long story short.